even though I've covered falling down already, I feel it's necessary to respond to this young man, the barking years, because he has a lot of things right, but he doesn't come to the very core issue, which is that the propaganda is anti-male propaganda. It's painting the father, that is the guy, as the villain, even though the whole film is contradictory. We're supposed to feel sympathy for him, and yet also seems the bad guy. And you can't have it both. So let's get into what Barking has to say.
On a sweltering summer morning in downtown Los Angeles, William Foster sits in traffic, slowly losing his mind. To all appearances, he's a totally average working schlub.
Okay, so you're admitting falling down, it's even in the name of Barking. This man suffers a nervous breakdown. So he can't really be the bad guy if he's mentally unstable.
Just making his way to the job surrounded by the chaos and noise of the city, and a million other people all trying to do exactly the same thing.
I'm going to correct myself. Yes, you can, but in this film, he really isn't the bad guy. You'll see.
It's claustrophobic, it's oppressive. The frustration and senselessness of the situation slowly reaches a crescendo in Bill's head until, finally overwhelmed, he abandons his car. One of the drivers behind him starts shrieking at him, but Bill barely seems to hear him. "I'm going home," he shouts over his shoulder. If only it were so simple. So begins Bill Foster's working day odyssey to return to his family and to his home, the story of which is told in the 1993 Joel Schumacher film, Falling Down.
Right, yeah. He's trying to return to his family, right? I mean, that's what all these guys live for. The family, by the way, barking, is code word for the wife. It's code for the wife. That's what guys don't admit. Having the family just means having a woman in your life.
On his way home, Bill will encounter all of the trivial faults of American life. Bad manners, shitty fast food, deceptive advertising, but also other problems that are not so trivial. And slowly, by degrees, Bill will begin to end his cooperation and toleration of all these minor torments. But as he starts pushing back, his rebellion becomes darker, more dangerous, ending finally with a standoff with the police and the iconic lines, "Really? I'm the bad guy? How'd that happen?" How indeed. On its surface, Falling Down isn't a very complicated movie. Bill Foster is a man who's down on his luck, maybe terminally, and one day he reaches his limit and decides he's not going to stand for it anymore.
Well, it's not really luck, is it? Because you're going to admit later on, you're going to show this film. I've seen it, by the way, and they're going to say how the family court judge wanted to make an example of him. That's not bad luck. That's someone doing something to you.
But by the end of the film, he's on the wrong side of the moral line, not to mention the law, and he pays the price. The message was clear. Modern life ain't perfect, but that doesn't give you the right to lose your mind and start blowing up stuff. Simple, right? But there's always something about the final scene when Bill is being confronted by Detective Prinder.
Prendergast, yeah, I don't blame you. It's a hard name for sure.
Prind
I'll get by that.
analysis that was left largely ignored by everyone, and beneath the surface of that analysis there was something that I didn't like. For years it's bothered me, but I've never actually sat down and tried to unpack why.
Well, you know something, Barking Years, when I saw it for the second time on YouTube, I immediately knew what it was about. I knew it was demonization of the male gender. But then, of course, I'm part of the pro male collective, and we have one up on most men. Okay.
Until recently. And what I've realized is that while most people look at Falling Down as a fairly simple movie exploring the plights
Stop right here. What was that? What was that? I'm going to get back there. Yeah, Barking Year, you got it right here. He's entering a bus and says, "I love you, Daddy," and she's crying. So this is an issue about a man losing his children through no fault of his own. And yet they make him the bad guy at the end? Right. You see that. You've got it in your own analysis.
simple movie exploring the plights of the little guy, the truth is a little more sinister. But to explain why, we're going to have to get deep into the weeds. If that's not your thing, no problem. Consider this your warning, but if you're still interested, I'm going to show you why Falling Down isn't the movie that you think it is.
I'm going to warn you, everyone. And you too, barking ears, you will not get to the core of it. Because again, that sign that says, I miss you, Daddy, that is the core issue. That's the core of this film. This man wanting to be validated. Validated, and he wants a social circle, a family. That's what it is.
After abandoning his car, William stops to make a phone call. But when the woman that we assume is his wife answers, he doesn't say anything, and instead he hangs up the phone. He then starts to make another call, but realizes he doesn't have enough money, and so he heads in.
Notice his wife is just as happy not having him around. And you're going to admit in your own analysis that this guy is not an abusive husband. Yet she's a part of this. His wife is a part of the system, dude. Barking ears, women don't like men. Men worship women, and women don't like men. And that's why this scenario is is very relatable to men, but they're not wanting to admit it. This is where you fall down. You can't admit what's happening here. He wants to be with the wife. The wife doesn't really give a shit about him.
Into a convenience store to get change. It does not go well. The shop owner refuses to give him change and insists that he has to buy something. This scene captures so many themes of this movie. During the 1990s, American attitudes towards immigration were extremely negative, possibly the most negative that they have ever been. But while it might be tempting to chalk this scene up to racism, what the conflict between Bill and the shopkeep really illustrates is a collapse of social capital. Social capital is understood as the networks of relationships among people who live and work in a particular society.
Social capital for him, Barking Years, is social acceptance. Why are there no films where the woman breaks down like this over this kind of situation? Because the woman always has social capital. You know, if you go on YouTube here and type in Karens, it has many women acting up. Why? Because they have social capital. So lacking social capital, that is social acceptance, is a man's issue. It's something that men have to bear.
Enabling that society to function effectively. It involves the effective functioning of social groups through interpersonal relationships, a shared sense of identity, a shared understanding, shared norms, shared values, trust, cooperation, and reciprocity. Basically, it's that feeling of being able to leave your door unlocked, or go by your neighbor's place to grab a cup of sugar, or whatever. That's social capital. It's what you get when people trust each other and feel a shared sense of identity and shared values. In the year
I doubt it. You know why? Barking Ears? Because this guy here, Bill, he's a trad con. And he would look for another group of men to call the bad guys, one way or the other. I mean, this is what this whole propaganda film is about. Bill is the bad guy because he's a guy. He's an outgroup guy to whoever made this film.
2000, 7 years after Falling Down's release, Robert Putnam would publish his landmark study, Bowling Alone, which demonstrated the precipitous decline of social capital in America.
Yeah, Bowling Alone, they show a man bowling alone, right? Women don't like men. They don't want to be around men, and they don't want to marry them. And that's why you've got a man bowling alone. Where's all his bowling buddies, right? Hey, Barking Ears, where's his bowling buddies? Men don't like other men either. And this guy could find some friends, but he doesn't want to. You know why? Because all the other males look at him and say, I don't want nothing to do with you. I'll only deal with you if you have a female partner. That's what's being left out by your analysis.
Williams' request for change is the kind of thing that would be a non-issue in a situation with high social capital. It's the kind of low-stakes favor that costs nothing to the...
Is it just that, or is it the Korean dude doesn't want to do favors to people who don't care about him? Like, he's a guy too. How many, if he's in a poor neighborhood, how many people come in and steal from him, shoplift, and give him a hard time? Like, I can actually understand this. Policies get set up for a reason. Just like why customers aren't allowed to use the bathroom because your bathroom gets destroyed or messed by customers. I mean, this is a I'm screwing it up. This is something that, has to be both sides looked at, right? He has his reasons.
Shopkeeper, but the man refuses. Foster tries to buy a Coke, but the price is too high.
Understand?
85 cents, 85 cents.
85 cents. That doesn't give me enough money for the phone call.
Well, choose something cheaper then, dude. And also, that's dirt cheap. And it's a corner store. It's not a grocery store, right? So everyone knows that convenience stores are expensive.
The argument quickly turns to cultural issues, with Foster complaining that he can't understand the man's accent.
It's a phi. I don't understand a phi. There's a V in the word. It's five. They don't got V's in China.
Not Chinese. I'm Korean.
Whatever. You come to my...
Not only do these men not...
Oh, by the way, Barking Years, this is important because what it is that he would not be saying that if this was a Korean woman. I guarantee you that. You see, when they talk about immigrants, they mean outgroup men. Outgroup men are entering my country, and I want as few as men to compete with me for the extra humans, that's women, as I can get, right? I don't want male competition. I don't like other men. So any excuse to exclude men from my space, they're going to make.
For the phone call.
The argument is ethnicity. They only barely share a common language. The confrontation escalates and the shopkeep goes for a bat, but Foster gets the better of him and takes it. He calls the shop owner a thief for charging 85 cents for a soda and begins walking through the store complaining that each of the products is too expensive and comparing them to previous pre-inflation prices, and then
Yeah, I don't need to go further in this one because this is one of the few times in the film he really is in the wrong. It's not this guy's fault that inflation exists, right? And William is a resentful man. And what does he do? What does he do, Barking Years? He does what men do. They can't get angry at the wife, which is who he's really screwing him over, his own wife. So he takes it out on another man. That's what you see happening here. He's taking it out on another man.
In some sense, Bill really means it, or he wants to mean it. This line ironically contrasts the scene that's just unfolded with the ideal that Foster longs for. He wishes for a world where saying this on the way out would make sense. This is the kind of world he longs to return to, but you're missing part of the picture if you don't see that Bill himself would be out of place in that world. This isn't a natural sentiment for him. It's a cope. It's a LARP. He tries to make his call again, but the line...
Ah, you've got it. It is a LARP. This guy doesn't want community any more than the next guy wants community. He wants his family intact. He wants to be with his special woman. That's what this is about.
Is busy, and he resumes walking. As these events are happening, we're also introduced to Detective Prendergast, played by the incomparable Robert Duvall.
This character is a real loser, everyone. He's the one at the end. He's a loser in the show, and he ends up coming out on top by taking the abuse. And that's the propaganda of this Barking Years. The propaganda is if you're a man who's being abused and you're down and out, just keep motoring. Keep motoring or take your life. That's what it's saying.
Prendergast is about to retire from the force. In fact, today is his last day on the job. In any movie, this is basically a promise to the audience that this dude is gonna die, and it's refreshing that the film acknowledges this trope, with all of Prendergast's colleagues continually referencing his impending death, despite the fact that he's intended to spend the entire day behind a desk. Far from being some cardboard cutout, though, Prendergast is a strange inversion of the cliched cop stereotype. He's even kind of disliked because of it. In fact, his captain, who actually is that stereotype, explicitly despises Prendergast.
I've never liked you. You want to know why? You don't curse. I don't trust the man.
On top of that,
that's the real man issue right here that you're hitting on, Barking Years. It's the real man. You're not a real man. You're not abusive to other men. You have dignity. You have respect of some kind. You have principles, and that's what he's against.
Prendergast is a man whose life has been touched by tragedy. He lost a child some years ago, and his marriage is an unhappy one. Over the course of the movie, we learn that his wife was once a beautiful woman, but as her beauty faded, she became increasingly needy and neurotic.
If this guy was here, if they wanted to make a great statement, he would leave his wife. Barking Years, he would leave his wife and make a better life for himself. He can't. Because the propaganda is about this man knowing his place.
She's the reason that Prendergast...
Not just knowing his place. It's also validating men's terrible decisions. That's what he's doing. Him staying with this woman is a terrible decision. And other men in real life make that choice. And so they need that choice validated. The writers are these losers.
Prendergast is retiring early and going to some rural backwater, even though it means he won't get his full pension. She doesn't like his job and is afraid that he'll be hurt.
By the way, this shows you what a scumbag his wife is. She's at home, so he's working and she's leeching off him. She wants him to give the lifestyle she wants, but also retire. You can't have it both ways. But it shows that women are into sadism when it comes to men. That's something you're missing out, Barking Years.
But this understandable concern has grown too intense, and she's begun to smother her husband. She calls his office throughout the day, and we get a sense that Prendergast has to devote a large amount of emotional resources to placating and comforting her, as embarrassing as it is for him.
There you go. So this is entirely within his decision-making power. He can leave his wife at any time. So this loser gets what he deserves.
Feel better?
No, I don't feel better.
London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down.
She's jealous, childish, and whiny, but she can also turn venomous and demanding at a moment's notice. As fate would have it, Prendergast's last day is...
Yeah, she's the bottom of the barrel of humanity. And yet he stays with her, and that's the propaganda of this film. That if you're female, it doesn't matter how low you are above any man.
Is deeply intertwined with Bill Foster's breakdown. From being caught in the intensified traffic jam that Foster creates by leaving his car, to encountering the shopkeeper, Prendergast is placed in a unique position to identify this string of seemingly random acts of violence as the work of a single man. Speaking of, Bill takes a moment to rest his legs. He's got a massive hole in his shoe and he's covered it up with a piece of cardboard. I don't normally fixate on craft, but this is a good detail in that it subtly foreshadows upcoming plot points. Why would a man with a white-collar job be walking around in badly worn-out shoes? It hints that there's something more happening here than it initially seems, but only if you stop to think about it for a second.
Yeah, this is very standard. You lose the wife, you lose the job with it. And then you're nobody. That's what he's... This is a problem with status. When you say social capital, it's status for men. He's at the bottom of the barrel now. He doesn't want to admit it. Guys like him, like Will, love the rat race as long as they're in the lead. Once they fail, then all of a sudden the race is no good. And this is what you're missing out on.
The movie itself draws no more attention to it. As he sits, Bill is accosted by two gang members. Here again, Bill is seen as the everyman pushing back against the forces of social decay that have enabled this kind of behavior.
Yeah, but these two guys, what are they? Why are they gangsters or mobsters or whatever? Because they were men born in a poor area. They had no way of gaining status. And so all they can do is turn to crime. Where are all the female criminals? There aren't any because the women are taken care of. Impoverished women, Barking Years, are taken care of. Where impoverished men are discarded. So what you see here is a trio of discarded men. And what are they doing? They're fighting amongst each other.
Bill agrees to leave the area, but the two thugs demand that he pay a toll and tell him to give them his briefcase.
You should pay a toll. How about that briefcase, man? Good idea. Give us your briefcase, man.
This is an odd thing to try to steal. You'd expect them to ask for his wallet. Wallets have cash and credit cards inside. Briefcases just have the substance of a man's work. At this point, we don't know what Bill does for a living, but it seems unlikely that the contents of his briefcase could have that much value to the thieves. The bizarreness of the demand is an indication that the briefcase has to have some kind of symbolic value that we should pay attention to. But what's even stranger is the fact that Bill refuses to part with it.
I'm not giving you my goddamn briefcase.
No, it's not. This guy is like a typical guy. Barking years. He doesn't like other men. You're going to actually explain it. You're going to explain that the case is a symbol of status. And these guys are trying to steal his status. And men will die before they give up their status. Because without status, a man is as good as dead anyway.
Whatever's inside is important enough to Bill that he is willing to risk his life for it. One of the guys pulls a knife, but Bill fends them off with a bat that he took from the shopkeeper. After the thugs flee, he throws the bat at one and picks up the butterfly knife. Now, even though I personally think that a bat is a more effective weapon than a butterfly knife, this illustrates the next theme of the film: escalation. Bill stops at another payphone and finally reaches his wife Beth, and we discover just how badly wrong things have gone in the Bill Foster family. He and Beth are divorced, and she has gotten a restraining order against him that's prevented him from seeing his daughter for a long time.
Well, there you go. There you go. So when couples divorce, why is it that instead of having equal parenting, instead of having equal time with their children, the man gets ousted out? The man gets ousted out because people don't like men barking years. That's why.
Throughout the phone call, Beth is remarkably cold and indifferent, refusing to offer even an ounce of empathy, even though Bill sounds like a man at the end of his rope.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Men are used people to their wives. Women do not love men barking years. They don't. Marriage is finding a servant. Who was it? Esther Vilar said that decades ago. The woman finds a servant. When she's tired of him, she ditches him. That's exactly what happened in this film.
He asks about his daughter, and Beth says,
"She's doing just fine without you."
an exceptionally cruel thing to say, unless she has very good reason, and we the audience are left wondering what that reason might be. As they talk, we see that the gang members from before have regrouped with their homies and are on the hunt for Bill. They spot him, and just as Bill is hanging up the phone, they perform a drive-by shooting. The shooting hits a number of bystanders but does nothing to Bill, who barely even seems to take notice. Then the gang crash their car. Bill approaches and finds one of the men who confronted him earlier lying on the pavement, unable to move but still conscious. Beside him is a gym bag full of guns. Bill picks up a submachine gun. "You missed," he says, and attempts to shoot the thief, but he hits the
Oh, by the way, what you're showing here, Barking Years, shows you the propaganda. You'll see what I mean.
car instead. "I missed too,"
I miss too.
he says with a slight laugh before relocating and trying again. This time, he hits the man in the leg, and then he takes the bag full of weapons and just walks away.
Yeah, he didn't actually kill these guys, who, by the way, would be completely understandable because he'd be defending himself. Now, he doesn't. He's not a coward, as you can see. But the film's propaganda is saying, if this man doesn't get hurt, at least these men get hurt. It's an anti-male film. These men all struggling for their status. Since they don't have status, they deserve to be harmed. That's what you're seeing in this film.
He continues towards home only to have his progress blocked by some kind of construction work for the second time. At the movie start, the traffic jam was also the consequence of a different construction project which had closed down lanes. When it comes to analysis, once can be chance, but twice is a motif. The construction work presents a real material obstacle in the here and now of the film, but is also a symbol for growth itself. The construction that Bill encounters isn't an expansion of the city into new areas. It's the kind of construction that has to be undertaken when an urban area's population has exceeded what it was intended for. Like a man loosening his belt after a big meal. The scene then changes to Beth's house, where some police...
Yeah, no, you're jumping from one to the other. The construction is a minor irritant that adds to it. What you're showing here, right here, is the meat of the issue that he's following, right? There's his daughter, and some other man is there taking care of her, right? Now let's get back there.
Growth itself. The construction that Bill encounters isn't an expansion of the city into new areas. It's the kind of construction that has to be undertaken when an urban area's population has exceeded what it was intended for. Like a man loosening his belt after a big meal. The scene then changes to Beth's house, where some police officers are asking her about Bill. The officer inquires about the restraining order that Beth has put on her ex-husband, and she confesses that a judge had encouraged her to get it in order to make an example out of Bill.
Horrendous temper, and I just didn't know if a restraining order was a good idea. I mean, but the judge said we should make an example of him.
See, this is anti-male movie. Barking Years. She admitted that this man was screwed over by a judge, and he didn't say what the gender of the judge was. It's probably a male judge. So the male judge doesn't like other men. There was no reason for him to do this. And yet she also went along with it.
She then goes on to admit to the officer that Bill had never actually struck her or his daughter. She simply felt like it was possible that he might.
There you go. You know why? Because she doesn't like him. Barking Years. This woman never loved her husband. She doesn't like him. When she says she feared that he might, what she's really saying is this guy isn't under my control. He's not under my thumb. And so I'm using the man-hating legal system to make sure he is under my thumb. This guy is now under my thumb. He's probably paying child support. That's what they're not mentioning in this film too, right? They talk about divorce, but not child support. So this guy is broke. Even when he had a job, he was probably broke. He was living with his mother, right? You even show it in the film. So this is about a man being betrayed by some woman who never loved him and said she did at one time, and she's being cruel to him for the sake of being cruel to him. So that's why, as you say, at the end of the film, when he's the bad guy, it's a 180. It doesn't make any sense. Unless you come to the terms, come to the conclusion that the writers themselves do not like men.
You think, the officer responds, and an awkward silence swallows the conversation as it's clear that the officer is not entirely convinced that Beth is in the right here. Bill
Well, he knows she's not in the right. And where you're supposed to get that point, right?
Continues on through a park where he is again accosted, this time by a man asking for change. He tells Bill a story about how he's from out of town and has gotten stranded here and just needs a couple of bucks to help pay for the gas to get home. But Bill...
Yeah, this isn't that important. This is just saying guys willing to scam. So let's get by this. Aha, but that's important right there. When he finds out what's in the case.
Hands him his work briefcase. This is a bizarre change considering that Bill was willing to risk his life for the same briefcase a couple of hours ago.
No, it isn't bizarre. It isn't bizarre. You said it yourself. This briefcase is a symbol, a status symbol, right? He gives it up to that guy because it's no longer a symbol of status to him. Once he realizes that the path he's been traveling has never had status to it, you're just a working slub, you're just a slave, he changes his mind about the suitcase. And therefore, it's not valuable to him anymore.
I don't need it anymore, he says. And the man is ecstatic, but after opening the briefcase, he finds that there's nothing in it except for some chips, an apple, and a crushed sandwich.
You say, this is an important reveal. You see, when we didn't know what was in there, it was valuable, it had status. But when he opens the case and he just shows his lunch, he's showing it doesn't have any status. But it's really saying it doesn't have any status anymore to him, right? That's why they didn't show it in the past, earlier, right?
Rather than carrying important documents of some kind, Bill's briefcase is just a glorified lunchbox. So why did he fight for it before? The answer is that the briefcase was a symbol for the kind of man Bill identified as, a productive, valued member of society.
Yeah, valued member, not productive so much as valued member. That's what it means.
It was part of the identity that Bill has crafted for himself over the years, and his willingness to give it up now is itself a sign of his growing alienation from society and also of the unlikelihood that he will turn back. He's leaving behind this identity. Now, rather than his...
Well, he's leaving it behind, or he realizes that it was never any good, right? The identity he wants is one of status, and he just realized this identity doesn't have any status. That's what, ergo, the transformation. This guy, if he could become a rock star, wouldn't choose this identity in the first place. Because Rockstar has incredible status.
His empty and totally symbolic briefcase, he carries the bag of guns that he picked up from the gangbangers. And unlike his briefcase, the guns are not symbolic. They are pure utility. He carries them for no other reason than that they seem useful. In one of the more iconic scenes in the movie, Bill stops at a
Not just seems useful, but how are they useful? Barking Years. They're useful is that they are a show of force that can get him what he wants.
McDonald's clone for something to eat. After all, he gave up his lunch with a briefcase. Here, again, there's a tension between the obvious absurdities of contemporary life and the extremes which Bill is willing to go to in order to push back against them. He approaches the counter and says that he wants breakfast, but he's told that he's 4 minutes too late for it. Certainly most, if not all of us, have experienced this frustration. Maybe you even thought about insisting and making a scene. Maybe you even did make a scene, but what you probably did not do was pull out a fucking gun. This last option is the one that Bill goes for, and immediately the restaurant is thrown into chaos.
Yeah, well, he had a nervous breakdown, and he has nothing to lose. That's what's going on here. He's demanding respect. You know, I want to be somebody. I come in here, I'm the customer, I'm important. That's what he wants.
For the first time, a third party is brought into Bill's drama. Up until this point, he's only experienced whatever journey he's on as an encounter between himself and the grotesque failures of modern society. But now, he is introduced to the public of other people who are able to witness him. And what he finds is that even though they should be on his side, after all, being denied something so simple as breakfast because of an arbitrary imposed time limit on when you can order it is imminently ridiculous. Something that should not be accepted, but it is accepted.
But is it ridiculous? I mean, after all, if I was running the business, you know, it actually makes sense to say, put all the breakfast stuff away and bring out the stuff for lunch. So I can actually understand that to a certain degree.
Accepted by the people around him, and so Bill's resistance, especially at this pitch, is seen as frightening, even as he tries to reassure them that he's not going to hurt them. Bill isn't antisocial. He is fundamentally pro-social. His enemy throughout Falling Down is the antisocial elements within society, with the signs of decay and the collapse of social capital that have made it increasingly unlivable.
Well, you're missing the point here. It's not that he's pro-social. He's pro-rat race as long as he's winning. And he's anti-rat race if he's losing. That's what you're missing out.
The tragic irony is that his crusade against these things is experienced as antisocial by the people around him precisely because they have accepted these absurdities. Bill changes his mind about breakfast and decides to get a burger instead. It's brought to him and he knows how pathetic it appears in contrast to the advertisement. Can anyone tell me what the problem with this picture is, he asks, and is met with silence. He turns to the crowd of diners and asks again, and the scene ends as a small boy raises his hand to answer the question. We then...
It's basically saying it's the emperor has no clothes. The little boy speaks it out. Yeah, that's true. But then, of course, Americans frequented McDonald's, didn't they? No offense, but this is upheld by everybody.
Cut to a scene in a diner in which Prendergast is explaining his retirement situation to his young and attractive partner. They discuss his wife's frailties and insecurities and how he's basically been muscled into making this choice before another cop, written to be as unbearably 80s jock as possible, comes and takes...
Yeah, he's 80s jock, but the pretty girl certainly likes the 80s jock, doesn't she?
Takes the partner away. But before she can leave, Prendergast makes one more thing clear. He loves...
This is another thing. This is a man opening his heart to a woman. Why doesn't he talk to any of his cop buddies, his male cop buddies, right? This is the woman worship that is common in the everyday man. And it's being shown on screen. And this is actually quite subversive because what does this woman do for him? Nothing. She hears him out and then she goes about her business. She doesn't really give a shit about this guy. But this woman worshiper does what? Tries to go to a woman like that, going like being female somehow makes her, you know, a good person or empathetic.
his wife.
Something about my wife. Maybe I never mentioned it. I love her.
Yet there was nothing to love about that person. Nothing. His wife is an empty cipher now.
The film then returns to Bill, who is walking by a man who's picketing a bank. He holds a sign that says, "Not economically viable." As the man explains, despite having been a loyal customer for 7 years, he's been refused a loan with the excuse that he is not an economically viable candidate for it. Now, because the man is black, you might miss that he is, in every other regard, visually identical to Bill. Everything, from the white shirt and black pants, to their matching ties, to the pins in their shirt pockets, is meant to demonstrate a connection between these two men. Everyone else is trying to ignore the man with a sign, but Bill continues to observe him as he buys a birthday present for his daughter, a snow globe. The protesting man is picked up by the cops and put into a car, and as the car drives away, it stops.
So this film, is actually very subversive. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not an anti-male film. Because they're showing that whenever a guy is thrown out, once he's discarded, once he's no longer useful, you either accept it or they come and get you. So maybe I'm wrong, Barking Years, about this being an anti-male film. Maybe it's just that subversive.
Stops for a moment, and the man looks directly at Bill and says, "Don't forget me."
Don't forget me.
And Bill nods sincerely, truly seeing the man.
Exactly. Bill here isn't a racist. But his anti-immigrant stance that he took there was about having more men come in and compete with him. That's what it was. It was an anti-competition stance.
Once again, he is a witness for what other people don't want to see or acknowledge. The veil is slowly being lifted for Bill. Anyway, remember that hole in Bill's shoe?
Oh, by the way, again, Barking Years. Where were the women out there with signs saying I'm not viable? Because they're always viable. If they can't afford a house, they find a man who can. They shack up with him.
Well, he's finally had enough and stops into an army surplus store in order to replace it. The store is run by a neo-Nazi who shows his colors by intentionally running off a couple of gay men, apparently his only other customers besides Bill. He's been listening to the police scanner all day and has realized that Bill, the man in his store, is the man who's been causing all this havoc. When Prendergast's partner comes into the shop asking if he's seen anyone that fits Bill's description, the man lies and covers for Bill, eventually sending the woman off with a bit of casual sexism. He then tells Bill that he's his friend and walks him back to his...
I don't give a shit about sexism, dude. The fact that you mentioned that at this stage of history is just lame.
...private stash and equips him with a rocket launcher. Bill wants to know why this man is helping him, and he realizes that it's because the man assumes that Bill is on a racial rampage, killing minorities.
I'm with you. We're the same, you and me.
We're the same, you and I, he tells Bill. But Bill quickly disabuses him of this notion.
You're not the same. I'm an American. You're a sick asshole.
He then tries to leave, but the neo-Nazi pulls a gun on him, suddenly directing even greater hatred than he has for minorities onto Bill. He goes through Bill's bag.
Yeah, because it's not about minorities. It's about hating other men. See?
Finding the snow globe and breaking it.
What is this doing in there?
He then attempts to rape Bill while
Sexually assault, you could use.
telling him to imagine that he is being raped in prison by a black guy.
So notice, he chases the gay man off, but he's willing to commit a homosexual act to harm another man. That says something really disgusting about male psychology, Barking Years. It really does.
Man in the shoulder. He then gets a gun and shoots the man dead. It's worth noting that the neo-Nazi is the only person that Bill intentionally kills in the entire movie.
Exactly. So he's not really the villain. In this case, it was absolutely self-defense. There's no time in this movie he's actually the bad guy, other than, I would say, that Korean store owner who really did nothing to him. That's the only time he was a bad guy in it, as far as I'm concerned.
And the purpose of this scene is to explicitly differentiate Bill from Nazism. He's not out on some racial vendetta, and he doesn't believe in their cause. He just wants to get home. He calls his ex-wife again, and this time the conversation is notably creepy and threatening. And again, it seems like the film wants to create confusion as to whether or not Bill is a good guy who's going through something or a villain. Obviously, this uncertainty is intentional, but it's also forced and unconvincing. This Bill doesn't feel like an organic evolution from the Bill that we saw earlier in the film. He feels like the writers are now leaning on his character to make him behave unnaturally. Bill leaves the story.
Yeah, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, right? They want him to be the bad guy at the end, but they haven't built up to it. That's right. It's bad writing because they want us to sympathize with them too. And really, I can't say you can't do both, but they just failed at it. By the way, anything he threatened his wife with, it's not really creepy. It's not creepy unless you think that his wife decided to oust him from the family unit when she admit that she was never really abused by him. If how that would be a revenge movie in any other scenario. Barking Years. You know, if it was a war movie and your war buddies turned on you, it would be a revenge film and would be entirely on this guy's side. But don't you find it strange? This is the real propaganda, that his wife completely betrays him. And yet when he gets threatening with her, all of a sudden we're supposed to feel for her and say it's creepy. Sorry, but that's pathetic.
Are now dressed in black military fatigues, visually indicating the changes that he is undergoing, and for the third and final time, his path is blocked by construction.
Yeah, he's becoming a badass. In other words, he's gaining status. This is another status climb. It's just like those gangsters, right? They're at the bottom of the pile, so they became gangsters in order to try and gain status. And that's what he's doing now. That's why he threw away his briefcase. He no longer saw it as a status symbol. And now he's donning the new status threads, right?
A lazy-looking construction worker tells him that he's going to have to go around, but this time Bill doesn't turn aside. He demands to know what's wrong with the street.
See, I don't think anything's wrong with the street. I think you're just trying to justify your inflated budgets. What are you, nuts? No, I know how it works.
And the other guy is dismissive at first, but when Bill flashes his piece, he becomes frightened and eventually admits that there's nothing wrong with the street, and that Bill is essentially correct. Bill tells him that he's going to give him something to fix and pulls out the bazooka and blows up the construction site.
Now, this is my point here, Barking Years. What makes this bad is the fact that it's misplaced aggression. He showed him on his enemy is his wife. The police chief's enemy is his wife and his coworkers. And so what he's doing, he's taking his aggression out on these construction workers who really aren't doing anything. So what if he's right about them in an inflated budget? I mean, everyone has to deal with this. It has nothing to do with his personal life. That's what this is. This movie is a personal. This is about something that's very personal. And then it brings out these other things like inflation, right? And people not having social capital and blah, blah, blah. None of that matters. None of that matters. These are just irritants. It's all about him being betrayed by his wife.
Prendergast has now managed to identify Bill and has tracked down his home address. They find out that Bill now lives with his mother, whom they visit, and Prendergast sees that Bill's father, also named William, was a decorated soldier who even received a Purple Heart for being injured in the line of duty. Bill's family has personally sacrificed for their country. He discovers that Bill is an engineer.
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything. War vets, there are homeless war vets out there in the United States. Nobody gives a shit about these men.
Building weapons that were used to protect Americans during the Cold War. Prendergast then gets his
But
partner.
they're not, it's not just protecting the Cold War, it's being aggressive. It's attacking other people. That's what you're missing out.
To call the company.
So Bill is all right with making weapons to harm other men, just as long as he's a somebody in America. That's what this is about.
And they find out that Bill was fired a month prior. When we catch up to Bill, he's passing through a fenced-in golf course, and a couple of older men become enraged by his desecration of their club. One of them is so irate that he attempts to hit Bill with his drive. Bill ducks the ball but comes back up with a shotgun and confronts the man for this horribly greedy waste of resources.
You should have children playing here. You should have families having picnics. You should have a goddamn...
He was all right with this when he was doing all right with his family. As a matter of fact, Bill here, if he could, would become a millionaire and he would join these guys. So he's being hypocritical here.
petting zoo.
He shoots the men's cart and it rolls down into the lake. Now the man who had tried to hit him begins to have a heart attack, and Bill asks what he needs, and the man says, "My pills." "Where are your pills?" Bill asks, and the man gestures to the cart that is currently sinking into the lake.
Well, I guess you're out of luck, aren't you? Now, aren't you sorry you didn't let me pass through your golf course? And now you're gonna die wearing that stupid little hat. How does it feel?
He's saying everything all of us are thinking. Yeah.
The next station on Bill's journey is a beautiful mansion, with an expansive lawn and a large swimming pool. He finds a family there, but realizes that the man is just a caretaker, sneaking his family onto the premises to show them a nice time and give them a taste of the luxury that exorbitant wealth can provide. Will asks what the owner of the house does, and the man tells him that he's a plastic surgery. He's a plastic surgery. Bill confesses, likely for the first time, that he lost his job.
I lost my job. I'm overeducated, underskilled. Maybe it's the other way around, I forget.
And you notice, Barking Years, he's confessing his heart to these people, and all they can do is feel fear, because he's not human to them. Men are not human beings to one another. We're the competition, we're the guys we have to fear. So he's opening himself up. Remember that the police chief, or what, he's not police chief, the cop there. He opens up to his girlfriend there. She doesn't really give a shit. He's opening himself up to this other family, and they don't give a shit. They just want him gone.
And I'm obsolete.
Bill finally realizes that the family is afraid of him.
What do you think? You think I want to hurt your family? I have a family of my own.
And we see the toll that this transformation is taking on Bill. He's reaching his breaking point and beginning to fantasize about oblivion and possibly taking his family with him.
And then when it got dark, we'd all go to sleep together. We'd all sleep together in the dark. And everything would be just like a...
Oh, by the way, Barking Years, this is something that women do far more than men. Mothers who actually are so bad that they get separated, like he was in the family court, they're the ones that usually try to murder the children or succeed at it.
It was before.
Here again, the writer's touch is far from being light. This monologue is here for no other reason than to try to give some plausibility to the movie's ending. Finally, Bill completes his journey back home, but his wife and daughter flee from their house and go out to the pier. You'd think that this is an obviously stupid idea, and it is, but whatever, it's a plot device meant to isolate the film's finale. Before he follows them, Bill stops in his old home to watch some home videos. In the videos, he finally confronts himself, seeing that he has sometimes been mean to his daughter and his wife. The film is clearly trying to draw some kind of parallel, but
This is something my man, Mr. Pink, said. He said, they talk about his bad temper. Wives are allowed to have bad tempers, and they don't use that as an excuse to boot them out of the family. I want you to know that.
between Bill's prior dickish behavior and the events of today, but it falls completely flat in that regard. One way in which it does work, though, is when we see a scene in which Bill is trying to get his daughter to get on a play horse.
Put her on the horse. There we go. Horsey ride.
She doesn't want to, and Bill begins to lose his temper. He starts cursing and complaining about how he bought her the damn horse, so she needs to cooperate.
Yeah, well, you know something? I hear all kinds of parents like this. They try something, doesn't go the way, they get disappointed. And it doesn't matter. It's a gender neutral issue. I hear just as many mothers talk like this as fathers.
And Bill, in the current moment, lowers his eyes in shame, realizing somehow that the same sickness with which he struggled today was in him too, even in his relationship with his daughter. On the pier, Bill holds his daughter and his ex-wife tells him that he needs...
Notice his daughter isn't afraid of him, is he? Is she? Right? So he He got angry once. Kids know that. Kids deal with angry parents all the time. So, of course, she still loves him. And here's your betrayer right here.
Help that he's sick. You want to see sick? He asks. Take a walk around this town. That's sick. At this point,
That's a sad excuse for response. He should be saying, you betrayed me. You betrayed me. That's what he should be saying.
Prendergast intervenes, lulling Bill into a false sense of security and then helping the ex-wife and daughter to get away. He then tells Bill that he, as in Bill, was going to kill his wife and daughter.
What are we gonna do?
I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Oh, guys like you always say you don't know what you're gonna do until you do it. I think you know exactly what you were gonna do. You were gonna kill your wife and child.
Yeah, you see, this is, as you say, it's the propaganda. So what they're saying here is that if your wife turns on you and boots you out when you're undeserving of that, you're just supposed to accept it. Take any amount of abuse and punishment that comes your way and keep trekking. Or we'll take you out.
Yeah.
Like I said, this has no other setup other than the bit of dialogue at the plastic surgeon's house. Understandably, Bill reacts with confusion.
I'm the bad guy?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Prendergast tries to persuade Bill to turn himself in, but Bill refuses. He's gone too far and has nothing left to return for. He tells Prendergast that he's still got a gun. Let's draw, he suggests. It's perfect. Showdown between the sheriff and the bad guy. It's beautiful.
You know, again, maybe I'm wrong about this being an anti-male film because this guy did make a choice. He chose death over living a life of complete worthlessness, of lack of dignity. This loser here chooses to have no dignity, go back to his job and be with his abusive wife. So his death is very heroic. It's a man saying, death is better than what you're offering me.
Prendergast tries to talk him out of it, but Bill draws on him, and only after Prendergast has shot him does he realize that it was just a toy water pistol. But Prendergast wipes a splash of water from his face as Bill says, and says with a smile, I would have had you, before he falls into the water below.
You see, he's not much of a bad guy, is he? He didn't even want to hurt that police officer. He never wanted to hurt anybody, even the wife who turned on him, who betrayed him. He just wanted acceptance.
Prendergast then returns to Beth and her daughter. There are children gathering outside their house. The birthday party guests have arrived at last. Beth asks him if she should tell her daughter what happened to her father, and he says to let her enjoy the birthday party. The camera follows one of the police officers into the house, and then peels away, entering the living room where the home videos that Bill had been watching are still playing on the TV. It zooms into some footage of Bill and Beth and their daughter gathered happily into the shot. A happy American family that has now come to ruin. And only one question...
Well, it didn't come to ruin. It didn't come to ruin. The wife is happy. Barking Years, what are you talking about? The wife is happy. Her life isn't ruined. She got exactly what she wanted. She got the child, which is hers, and she had the husband look after her for a while. Then she booted him out. She got everything. To her, nothing has been ruined.
Remains. Who's to blame? No analysis
The wife is to blame. It's that simple.
of Falling Down would be complete without some discussion of literally me characters. As far as I can tell, the whole phenomenon
This is important too. You're going to get this wrong, and I'm going to correct you.
really took off in 2018 with this meme. It shows a skinny, bespectacled teen on his computer looking at an array of iconic anti-heroes and claiming, wow, this is literally me. Now, if you're simply going off of this image alone, you'd assume that the intent here is simply to kind of mock the lack of self-awareness of the kid who doesn't seem to see that he is in no regard like these men.
No. See, you lack awareness. This meme isn't saying this boy has a lack of awareness. It's saying he does have awareness. It's saying all boys are like this. All men are evil. If you're born male, that's what you are. He's saying This is what I am. I am a bad person. Why is he bad? Because he's male. So this shows me that you have your head buried in the sand, or you just lack awareness. This meme is assault on low status boys. Surplus men. That's what it is. A teenage boy is a man with no status. And men are hated. Their status is loved. So if a man gains status, he'll be considered a decent person. Well, that's a lie too, because that I'm being proven wrong with that recently too. But the point is, they really hate guys who have no or low status. That's what a teenage boy is.
But that's kind of a weird objection if you think about it. We don't usually expect teenage boys to have the same qualities as men in their late 20s and 30s. That's sort of what
Well, no, people hate boys and men. They have the same thing in common. They're both male.
those years are used for. There's another version of the same basic concept that showed many of the same characters with text reading, "You missed the point by idolizing them." And here the matter is laid bare. The point
Whoever said that is gaslighting. Because the women idolize these guys too. As you know, real life serial killers have harems of women, fan clubs of women. These guys would be loved and respected over you and me, Barking Years, the ordinary guy.
point being made is that these characters are not meant to be identified with. They are, above all, not meant to be treated as aspirational. They were meant to entertain, as part of the entertainment.
If the thug gets the girl, he's aspirational to the average guy, like you. You want the girl, you see the thug with all the girls, you want to be him. It's that simple.
Industry. But if removed from the playpen of fictional stories, they're meant to be viewed with suspicion and fright. They are meant to be threatening, because they are. They are dangerous. The problem is, they're also really fucking cool. Some people are prone to complaining about
And thank you for admitting that. They're the badasses. Dude, know what's missing up there? The Joker. The Heath Ledger Joker. Everyone loved him because he was a badass and he kicked ass and took names.
how these characters have been romanticized in popular culture. A complaint to which I say, that's because they're romantic, idiot. That's what the word means. And in recent years, the very attractiveness of these characters has become a problem. And that's why there's been a fair amount of controversy surrounding the growing interest in these characters, especially among young men today. People who write for publications like The Daily Star are very, very concerned about the rise of literally me characters. For as often as people like to say,
They aren't concerned, dude. They're not concerned. That's a lie. Don't give in to their framing. They're not concerned. They're attacking men. They're attacking young guys who haven't even got into life yet as adults. They're now cranking down on the rights of men. When they talk about that, what they're doing is saying men are dangerous by nature, so we have to strip them of their rights. That's what's going on, Barking Years.
relax, bro, it's just a movie. Many of these same people seem to be very troubled with these movies and these characters and the fact that lots of men, especially young men, are connecting with them. But what's the problem here? Why isn't this just another just a movie situation? The answer to that question lies in the nature of literally me characters and the reasons why people relate to them. What is a literally me character? Obviously,
It's a young guy who's being demonized for being male. That's what he is. That's what this is.
assume that it's a character that viewers identify with in some special way, or to a greater degree than normal, but that's a pretty bad description. After all, nearly all movie protagonists, if they're written at all well, are easy to identify with. Otherwise, the audience isn't likely to care too much about their story and the movie's going to fall on its face. What makes literally me characters unique is what it means to identify with them, what a person is identifying with when they identify with a literally me. In addition to all being male, what these characters have in common.
There's no addition, dude. Now you're hitting it on the nail on the head. They're all male. They're all male. Exactly. So a female character who's a scumbag that women tend to aspire to be, she's great. She's like the femme fatale is something that women love. And no one if a woman says, I really admire that femme fatale in those, like the 1940s noir film, nobody suggests that she is a psychopath, do they? Or that maybe we should do something about these young women, right? So there is nothing addition about this. These are male characters. That's what the issue is.
Common is that they have all placed themselves outside of mainstream society in a radical way. They don't care about.
No, they didn't place themselves outside. They were kicked outside. I forget his name, the taxi driver guy. He was kicked out of side. He's a discarded man. So is Tyler Durden here. They're discarded men.
Conventions or manners or the sensibilities of white women. They are openly hostile.
The sensibilities of white women. That's okay. He's like, you've got a blind spot, dude. It doesn't matter what color the woman is. They're all the same.
Or at the very least indifferent to the dominant culture. And on its own, that would
also, you're admitting in that one sentence that women have social dominance in society. Thank you for admitting that.
be such a threat. After all, every blockbuster baddie and Hollywood terrorist is equally antagonistic to the mainstream culture. And we don't actually find them that threatening. They're outsiders, only there to get knocked down to affirm the righteousness of the cause. But the literally me is an insider, a native son, and he's gone off the reservation, so to speak. He's seen what...
Again, what it is these guys, these insiders, they're not actually against society. They're just angry that the rat race is being lost by them. I got to keep hammering home. This is what it is. This is a resentful man who was betrayed by his wife and then takes his aggression out on everyone else. That's his real failing.
Society has to offer, and he said, not good enough. This immediately makes him subversive to that social order. His rejection points the way to alternatives, other ways of being. The most compelling literally me characters may even have their own vision of those social alternatives.
God damn it, since when is Project Mayhem about murder?
The buildings are empty. Security, maintenance, all our people. We're not killing anyone, man. We're setting them free.
And usually, these movies are meant to persuade viewers that those alternatives ought to be rejected. The literally me is meant to either be reconciled with society or die because he won't be. And that's what people mean when they say you miss the point. You miss the intent of the movie makers. But at the same time, the people who say this have kind of missed the point themselves. These characters are usually responses to some force in society that is alienating for them. Maybe it's the
male alienation. You mentioned it. All the characters are male. So women don't suffer this alienation, do they?
bland corporate nihilism of office work or the barely contained barbarism of modern life, but each of these characters represents a response to some failure in society. They are the embodiment of a critique, and the typical purpose of the film is to absorb and refute that critique.
I'm going to keep saying that. I'm going to keep saying this. If these guys were on the winning side of it, they would think society was perfect.
Foster isn't your typical literally me character. Unlike Tyler Durden or the driver, no one is in danger of idolizing Bill. For starters, he's not young. He's not romantic. For God's sake, he's carrying pins in his shirt pocket. He's not an idealist, at least not much of one. He's pushing 40 and he's got a family.
But he does become romantic, dude. He ditches that outfit for the badass outfit, the army fatigues. That's how it's romantic.
Or at least he had one. He has a job, or at least he had one. He's no Tyler Durden, he's just dad. He doesn't mean to rock the boat, he just wants to be on the boat. He might be a dork, but that doesn't make him wrong. And truly understanding this movie means being able to see past the crude manipulations that are intended to turn him into a villain.
Yeah, he wants to be on the boat. In other words, he doesn't want to be discarded because he's an excess male. That's what he's become, an excess male. And this character here, how many homeless people did he walk by in his lifetime? Sorry, homeless men. The vast, vast majority of homeless people are men. How many homeless men did he walk by in his 40 years? Men don't care until it's happening to them.
The critique that Bill represents is a critique of America's culture and its managerial class, and how they have altered society in the name of increasing economic output.
Okay, this is elites, blah, blah, blah. It's not the managerial class that kicked him out of his family, is it? Is it, Barking Ears? You're showing the villain of the story right here. She was not abused by her husband. Her daughter loves her father, and she just got rid of him because she didn't like him. There's your villain.
His journey is a journey of discovery, leading finally to a question that is never asked, but which is implicit throughout the entire film. What has happened to the American dream? A question which...
Oh my God. Oh my God. This is Barking Ears. This is terrible. I'm sorry. This is where you fall down in your analysis. This is not, his American dream is the same as every other country's dream. The Polish dream is to get with the girl who loves you for yourself. That's what this American dream is. The Ugandan dream for a man is the exact same thing. To find a Ugandan woman who loves you for yourself. God. Okay. Oh, you're talking about no-fault divorce, right? So you're admitting now this is about divorce. It's about the woman kicking the man out. It's not about the American dream. Unless you're willing to admit what I said, that the American dream is to be with the girl. But notice you mentioned nothing about child support. Because his wife divorcing him wasn't just leaving him, she was making him pay child support.
1970, and it was not universally legalized until New York adopted it in 2010. In previous times, it had been judged to be against the public interest to allow people to exit the bonds of marriage without either party having betrayed those bonds in a significant way, such as abuse or adultery. Unsurprisingly, this led to a massive rise in the rates of divorce, which was...
Okay, so you're admitting that the women didn't like the men. Women don't like men. That's because they're the ones who got divorced once the no fault came along. This movie shows it.
a source of controversy for many years. To make things still worse, Bill is saddled with a restraining order against seeing his young daughter despite no history of abuse and not even the abuse of alcohol.
Well,
And
there you go again. See what I mean? This is about a man having no rights in his marriage. So, I mean, why would you get married? But again, this is everything else is trimming Barking Years, the American dream and inflation and all this other business and road construction. This is the heart of this film. A man being betrayed by his wife. That's what's going on here.
why? Because some enforcer of an already dubious legal code decided to make an example of him. If Bill's story were simply an isolated case, it might be one thing. But unfortunately, Bill is far from being an isolated case. In the 2012 book, Coming Apart, sociologist Charles Murray documents the stories of two Americas, working and upper class, over the course of 50 years from 1960 to 2010. The picture that he paints is a disturbing one, as he shows that these two groups have diverged from each other radically, not just financially, but across a wide range of social measures. While the fates of those in the upper and managerial classes have risen...
You show prison rates. What you don't show is the difference between the genders. It's not just the impoverished people that are getting jailed. It's impoverished men that get jailed. Women's prisons are not filling to the brim. Are they? Matter of fact, there are discussions in places like Britain that think we shouldn't even have women's prisons, right? So what's going on here is as men get poorer, they become criminals in order to gain their status to get that magical girl who will dump them later. That's what's happening here, Barking Years.
Consistently, those in the working class have fallen sharply. This fall has included increased rates of divorce, increased rates of crime, increased out-of-wedlock births, increased numbers of people in prison.
Again, divorce, that's women getting rid of the men. Crime, that's men who are too poor to bribe a woman, turning the crime to bribe her. Out of wedlock births, what does that got to do with anything? Barking years, you're a trad con, aren't you? Who gives a shit about whether your child is out of wedlock? And prison population, that's a male issue. Okay?
Decreased labor participation, decreased community.
Again, labor participation, that's a male issue. Men are the ones who get discarded when they find they're unemployed. Bill's wife there, did she look like she had a job? Looks like she was a housewife. So when Bill lost his job, it was devastating, which she never had one, and her life was just fine. So labor participation is a man's issue, right? And religiosity has nothing to do with anything. Who gives a shit if religion dies? You know, and community, that's women. Community focus is, they are the nucleus of community. So when women start dumping the men, the community dies.
Community participation, decreased religiosity, and more. Taken together, one sees the story of Bill Foster writ large, an increasingly unstable society in which families and individuals have to work harder and harder under conditions of greater and greater competition just to stay afloat. Public.
Yeah, again, you're missing the point though. The women are the ones that destroyed the family unit because the family unit was strictly for them. Once they realized they could have it without having the man in the life, they ditched the man. So, I mean, this is the case. They are to blame. They are to blame. Men want to be with women. Women don't want to be with men. It's that simple, barking years.
Public goods that could previously be enjoyed by everybody.
Okay, I don't even give a shit about that. Let's go by this, see if we have.
Kind of morality. But Bill is beginning to wake up to the reality in which these promises are in fact empty. That America is in fact a place dedicated to maximizing economic growth, and doing so in such a way that it is guaranteed to produce a certain number of losers who are not economically viable.
Well,
And Bill's
that's always been the case. There's always been impoverished people. So it's not like he's had the wool pulled over his eyes. It's simply that he saw him as being a winner, and he turned out to be a loser. That's his only issue. To me, that's what makes William Foster a villain, is because he's really the typical man who really is all for the rat race. He's all for the abuse that men take as long as he is the winner. And when he fails, or in this case, when he's kicked out of the family unit by his wife, he gets resentful and angry, and he becomes violent to people who aren't even a part of the problem. Right? Like he beat up on that poor guy, that poor Korean store owner. It had nothing to do with the fact that his wife dumped him. Jeez. I'm not going to go at the end of it. This is far enough. This is long enough. Barking Years, I hope you see this and you learn something from it. Thank you.